911 emergency, what do you report?
911, what's your emergency?
Welcome once again to We Speak Dispatch. We're so excited that you're here. We have got Doug and John and Glenna taking part in today's conversation. And as per usual, they have no idea what I'm about to ask them. So it makes it exciting. And yeah, aren't y'all thrilled?
No.
A lot of us, all of us here on the podcast are in some form or fashion involved in training, whether it be at the agency level or we travel the country and train dispatchers in person classes, but we're all part of training. And one of the things that I have heard over and over and over is we've got some really motivated dispatchers and even some motivated CTOs. And sometimes the wheels seem to be falling off at the supervisor level.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to talk about maybe some stories that you have heard that you feel comfortable sharing, or how, if you are a supervisor, what training have you gotten? And what I think is maybe some of our supervisors don't realize or don't understand the impact and the power that they have on their center. So I just want, and we've all been in a supervisory role in the past. So give me some insight as to some of the best supervisor training you've gotten, and maybe some things that people can do starting the very next shift that might help with that impact or influence on their centers. So who wants to go first?
I will tell you a little funny story. When I do CTO classes or supervisor classes or things like that in leadership, I'm always surprised that I did this one exercise one time at a comm center, which shall remain nameless. It doesn't really matter where it's at in the world. And but it was one of these places where they were having lots of problems with their trainees not making it. The management was blaming the trainers, and the trainers were saying they don't get any support from the management. So I did a simple exercise right at the very beginning. I said, I want everybody in here, and I had the director all the way down to the CTOs. I said, I want everybody to draw out their title, what you're responsible for, what you do, and for everybody, I want it all to be completed so you know exactly what you're responsible for. Mm-hmm. Probably 20 minutes into this thing, I had so many people going, I thought I was doing that. You do that now? When did that happen? And I'm going, if you all don't know who's in charge, nobody's in charge. And so the director caught me on the break, and I'm getting the Coke out front, and he stands up there and he goes, you know what, Doug, this is a bunch of, and he's like really going off. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, I have sent email after email after email to these people saying, this is what your job is. And I said, I don't know about you, but I get a lot of emails, and a lot of those I'm kind of like, delete. I don't even read them.
Yeah.
I said, so how do you even know they're getting it? Why can't you just tell them this is what we do? And he's like, well, I'm really busy. Well, I said, so are they. The whole thing is, if you're too busy here, they're too busy there, they're too busy here, nobody's going to get nothing done. Everybody has to have a clear understanding of what the chain of command is and what you're responsible for. Then you can kind of do what your job is. So that one always surprised me, when nobody knows what the hell the job is.
Yeah.
Love that.
What about you, John? What do you got?
People don't like it.
I think back in when I started in the supervisory role, it was all about, okay, how am I going to fire someone?
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, that's
Positive.
you always go into that as far as like, because maybe that's what I've always seen growing up as to what my supervisors have done. And I've been on eggshells, so I'm just following suit. But probably the best training was one of the supervisors at my center who retired, not resigned, but she did retire. And just learning the ropes from her, and then the agency brought in an outside company specifically for 911 communication supervisor training. And it was just general supervisor concepts and things that, anyone can teach, but it was nice that it was 911 driven, and someone who was in the industry was talking about with those relatable examples like Doug said.
Sure.
Right.
So I
Right.
think it started there from that like outside training kind of thing. And we're fortunate that our locality offers training and career development for all county employees.
Wow.
So a lot of that is based on supervisor and leadership training, no matter what role or agency you're in with the county. So it's
Right.
just growing from there.
That's awesome. What about you, Glenna? You're in a unique position because weren't you an interim for a while and then you're line and maybe thinking about supervision as a career step? What do you got?
Yes. You know, the best thing that I learned as a dispatcher, as a trainer, as a SWAT dispatcher, so like the C&T part, as a instructor, everything was learning about the different learning styles, because it's so much more than just learning your learning style to teach you, to train you, and then get you out on your own. Knowing your partner's learning style, you know how they communicate. Knowing subordinates' learning styles, you know how they accept information, they accept feedback, they give feedback, they give information. So and as a supervisor, I really had to fall back on that, in that I'm not going to talk to this person this way because they're not going to hear anything I have to say. I need to be direct with this person. I need to tell this person exactly what I'm thinking. Whereas this one, I'm going to need to start the conversation with, okay, we're going to talk about A, B, and C, but I don't want you to get upset. Let me show you this, or let me show you that. You know what I mean? So learning styles, actually, when I put together a class just recently for a different group of people than I normally teach, I had to go back to, how are they going to learn? How are they going to accept this information? And I had to go have a conversation with a few of them just to remind myself of how they receive information best. And that was the greatest thing. It helps me at home. It helps me at work. It helps me on the phone. It helps me with my partners. It definitely helps me with my trainees. Makes the whole training program more successful.
Yeah.
Well, and just because I know we all probably have access to that learning styles assessment. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you're interested in that, throw us an email or give us a post on one of our social media platforms, and we'll be happy to send that to you.
Yes.
So it's huge. What do you think? I mean, John was talking about supervisor training. Where do you think we should focus that training on, and what? Because I'm going to be retiring within the next few months, and I had somebody come interested in taking over my position. And so she was asking me, how can I prepare for the position? What can I do? And it got me to thinking about this topic is, I can show you how to write an evaluation, and I can show you how to do the schedule, and, all of those things. But where do we need to spend the most time with our supervisor training? What are those key skill sets that are perishable, by the way, but what are those skill sets that a supervisor needs to have when they move into that role and to flourish in that role? Because we don't want you to just, dip your toe in the water and say, "Ooh, I don't like this," and then go back to being a line dispatcher. But how can you maintain your level of involvement and enjoyment of that supervisor position? Where do we need to focus our training?
I think that I've been very lucky in my career. I've had a lot of good mentors that gave me some good advice. And I know that when I trained new supervisors and they would come and, brand new supervisor would be in there, and we'd bring people in the office to talk to them, just talk to people and see what's going on. And they're always like, "I hate to talk to people like that. Just tell them what to do." And I'm like, you have to kind of talk to people and kind of like get them on your side of, here's why we're doing it this way. This is why we do it this way. And I got a lot of kudos for talking to people and not writing them up every 5 minutes, because that doesn't do anything.
Right.
But it's like, I can convince them, why are we doing it this way? Here's what we want. We want you to come along with us on this way. And it took some time to talk to people and get them that way, but you could do it after a while. And I know I've had several people that I worked with that were just, they didn't like it at first, but then they realized how powerful it is and how you treat people like people. These are individuals that have, maybe they got personal issues going on at home or wherever, and they're just not willing to tell you at this point. But once they trust you, then they'll tell you, and then you can get them on your side. I think that's such a talent that a lot of people just skip by and go to what John said. When I got promoted to LA, it was nothing but, here's how to write them up. Here's how to catch them doing this. And I'm like, that's my job. I don't want to do it. Don't do it. So I really think I need to spend more time focusing on the human side of this job as opposed to the other.
Yeah, I agree. The whole thing with supervision is not how to handle a process and manage an event or a phone call. It's leading people.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest word that comes out is relationship. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just changing that mindset. But to get there, I think we're so usually promote from within. And it's not, sometimes it's, well, you were a good dispatcher, so you'll be a good supervisor. Other times it's a promotional process, and it doesn't matter how you were in the prior position. You just did good on this process. You came out highly qualified. So now we're all making you an offer kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think some of those processes and that training that you're talking about, Leslie, is personnel. It's just talking with people, communicating. It's not over the phone, but just going back to those kinds of things. So like, okay, well, how do you cut up on the floor with your dispatch partner? There's no reason you can't do that as a supervisor too. You know, I go down to their level. I don't want to say their level.
Wow.
That's not what I meant.
We're all at that level, John.
Yeah, well, and that's what that's my point, Glenna, is, you know, I want to bring myself into the level that, you know, where the roots are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, where they feel comfortable. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
that's perfect. Yeah.
Glenna, go ahead. You had something I saw.
I do. And I think this may be where you're leading, but I'm just going to come out and say it. I have a supervisor at my agency that has recently gone through some specialized training, and she brought back adaptive leadership. That's what this sounds like it is. And notice we say the word leadership, not being a boss, because there's a big difference between being a boss and being a leader. And I think that we need to teach our line level people how to be leaders so that we can effectively pick supervision from that.
Yeah,
and so
I
maybe because I'm not very well versed in what adaptive leadership is, but it sounds to me like this is what we're talking about. You got to bring everybody on board. So Leslie, maybe you can follow up there.
And I'll get into adaptive leadership here in a second, but I want to go to something that John said, and it was like this light bulb went on, because he's mentioning as dispatchers, as call takers, whatever you call yourself, that we are so good with solving a problem that maybe has taken decades to develop in a phone conversation within the first 15 seconds, that it's easy. But what we don't train to very often as emergency communication specialists or telecommunicators or whatever is how to have a face-to-face conversation. That's a skill set that's lost. Let's just think about where we've been in the last year, where face-to-face conversation is happening over a screen. And I've even been to some trainings where I don't even have to have my camera on.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think, John, it's, yes, like you said, you may have been a great dispatcher. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good supervisor. But one of the first things we need to focus on in the supervisory role is teaching people how to connect face-to-face.
Yes.
And one of the things I've had other people who I have trained as a supervisor, so I'm a supervisor and I have trained new supervisors, is through observational learning. So if I'm having a crucial conversation with someone, I'll say, come in the office, not only just to be, or a private setting, not only just to be a witness or a second, which is always good. Again, something learned.
Right.
But also, hey, I want you to see the interaction, how I started it, how I kicked it off. What did I do? How did I change? Did you happen to notice John's body language, that kind of thing? And then you actually talk about it after. I mean, it's through simulations in a class, you know, scenarios go as like, okay, whatever. But, you know, on the job, and it's hard if you're not in that role because dispatchers are not privy to those personnel conversations. And that's what they are. So maybe training as a trainer, we've talked a lot about that. You know, CTOs are limited supervisors. So some of them should have, although not all, should have that upbringing, so to speak.
Yeah. And you know, Doug, how did you learn? Because it sounds like your experience when you first started was very much all the negative stuff. So did you just learn by doing, or was there somebody who kind of showed you the ropes?
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate. I had some really awesome mentors, a lieutenant that I'm still friends with and a captain. It was just awesome. But here's what's funny. You made a comment a minute ago about you're a good dispatcher, but maybe not a good supervisor. When I first tried to promote way back, you had to submit this thing called an SOQ, statement of qualifications, came from your supervisor to say you've got the qualification to promote. So I got this thing back and it said, Doug is an awesome dispatcher. This guy can dispatch like crazy. So good. And I'm like, yeah. So then I went to go take the test and they said, oh, you're not qualified. That's not going to work for you this time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It says I'm a good dispatcher. They said, exactly. It says you're a good dispatcher. And I'm like, oh, dang, I didn't think about it until they brought me back in and said, you're not ready. You're really cocky or whatever. And they said, as soon as you start to learn this stuff. And so I had somebody take me under the wing and say, look, start treating people like humans, like people have feelings and stuff. And you have to be kind of like that. And she really spun me around to where I really started using that. And that's sort of my entire style of how I've supervised. It's just this more home kind of folksy kind of, because it works. It just works.
It does.
Sometimes it's innate. I mean, I have colleagues that they have the gift of gab, something I do not. But the gab doesn't go off on all these tangents and everything. It just keeps it on track. But my God, they'll be your best friend. I mean, they'll zing you when they need to. Yeah. But you know, it's okay. It's going to sting a little, but after we're done, we know where we stand, kind of thing.
Right.
Right. Sometimes you have that light conversation, and you walk out, you're like, I don't know what the hell, what I do next.
Yeah.
But I think with Doug and Leslie, it is something you just learn on the job, unfortunately. But you know, what can you do to prepare?
Right. And I think you just have to, if you're a new supervisor, find some mentors, either that are in your center or maybe, you know, outside the center. Maybe there's a sergeant or a captain or somebody that you can, you know, that you really respect, and watch them and have them show you the ropes and see what to do, because it's like everything else. None of us were born to be dispatchers, but yet here we are. And it's a job that we absolutely love and we identify with and can't imagine doing anything else. And same thing happens at the supervisor level. You've got to practice, and you've got to recognize that at that level, you have some responsibilities that sets the tone for the entire room. And one of the things that I've heard over and over is if you permit it, you promote it. So if you're walking into the room in a bad mood, guess what? Now everybody gets to be in a bad mood. If you say things or do things that are counter to the organization's mission, you've now given everybody permission to do that. And sometimes I think it's that conversation to have, hey, you may not think you have a lot of power, but don't confuse power and authority, because those are two different things.
Yep.
And even the person who was just hired yesterday may have a lot of power in the room. They may not have the authority, but they have a ton of power in the room. Yeah. And I think it's to remember.
It is kind of funny because I know that I hate to say this saying because everybody says it and it's so goofy, but it's this pay it forward thing. Because I felt like I was good at what I did, that I could train a lot of people. And my department was sending supervisors down to work with me when I was in San Bernardino and stuff, just to kind of get what's going on. How come that works and this doesn't? And it's like, I felt like it was my obligation to kind of tell people, like, you may think this is goofy or you may think it's dumb, but it works.
Yeah.
It's the thing. You got to understand that. And you can't just order people around like a dictator. So,
Yeah.
I mean, unless you come in, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just didn't want to forget the adaptive leadership thing. We'll circle back around.
So unless you come in as a supervisor, you have to remember that you will be supervising people that were your partners. And that is, so if you treat your partners like crap, and then as a supervisor, you now are going to have to go back and get that trust back with them. And that's almost impossible to do. If you've screwed over your partners, or you're not a very good partner as a dispatcher, it doesn't matter if you're a spectacular dispatcher. If you're not a very good partner, then forget about being a good supervisor, because it doesn't matter how many skills you learn, nobody's going to trust you. So just remember that if you ever want to promote at an agency.
Yeah. And I heard all of you say it: trust and relationships.
Yep.
Those are two skills that you can't read about in a book.
Nope.
You can't learn in a class. You have to bring it to the table with you. So we're not going to talk about adaptive leadership right now because it is a whole section, but there's
Hopefully
a whole
somebody
book
look it up.
called
There it is.
The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. So we'll talk about that at some other juncture, but thank you very much for all of your insight. I hope you found this episode useful. I think we need to talk more about supervision and how that works. And we'll get into communication styles and all that other stuff on a future episode. Let us know what you want us to talk about, because we speak dispatch, so you should be speaking dispatch as well. We are heard on anywhere you can find a podcast. We're there.
Yes.
Spend some time maybe giving us a review, or giving us a high five on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or all those other things. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hey, this is Jill, and you've been listening to another great episode of We Speak Dispatch, proudly sponsored by our friends at Zybex.
911 emergency, what do you need?
911. What's your emergency? Okay, how can I help you?